Alrighty. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 371 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with.
Nazeeh August.
And me and Nazeeh going one-on-one today, which is the two of us for this episode. We got movies that we saw this week in part one. Strangely, we have a theme for part one, so I guess we're going to roll with that.
We do.
And then in part two, we're going to be wrapping up our Young Critics Watch Old Movie series from 1989's A City of Sadness, which is a good. I enjoyed the movie, but the title makes it seem like it's going to be much more of a bummer, which is relatively of a. There's bummer moments in it.
It's heavy, but no, I loved it too.
Yeah. Real quickly, head over to cinematary.com. We're going to have some coverage of TIFF coming up. We also have a bunch of new writing on the old website. I think we got a review coming up soon of what is Logan? What are the new movie? Oh, Cry Macho. Logan's going to be writing about Cry Macho.
Nice.
So if we talked a little bit about that movie last week. So if you're a Clint person, we got that coming for you in a couple weeks. Let's go ahead and dive into our part one. Like I said, we got a theme. We got nighttime, one day movies.
Yeah, just like over the course of a single night, and
over the course of a single night,
and just constantly just things going wrong.
So that's the theme of part one. We're going to kick it off, though. I caught After Hours, the Martin Scorsese film, for the first time. It's currently on Criterion Channel, but it's been around. I've seen it on it's been one that's been on my list for a while. It's because it's been on like Hulu and all these other places that I've been meaning to watch it because it's always been described as like not necessarily minor Scorsese, but like very underrated Scorsese. And I can kind of see why. But for those who don't know about After Hours, it came out in 1985. Stars Griffin Dunn, and he kind of just lives, or he works this very monotonous job as a word processor. And one night he is out just at a coffee shop, and he meets this girl who kind of invites him to call her to meet up later. So he ends up calling her, and she invites him to her place in Soho, and then it just unravels from there. The rest of the movie is just the night unraveling, and him running into different situations. But I could see why this is kind of classified as like again not a minor but a different Scorsese, because you think of Scorsese very much like he does have like that style. You think of like Goodfellas, and Taxi Driver, and a lot of his like very like the kind of obvious well-known Scorsese movies, and he does like have that style to him. He has like the long one takes, and he just kind of has this movement with the camera that you kind of become accustomed to with Scorsese. He has those like medium shots and like Raging Bull and Taxi Driver and stuff like that. But this one kind of feels like he's like playing around in like a completely different world than like you're accustomed to. Like it like honestly, to be really, if you didn't tell me that, or that like I didn't have directed by Martin Scorsese, or I didn't know previously that this was directed by Martin Scorsese, I probably wouldn't have guessed that it is one of his movies, because it really doesn't carry a lot of those trademarks, which is, I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's honestly kind of a cool, kind of a cool outlier to what we know as his kind of canonical movies. And honestly, like I think this might be one of his better ones. I really like, it was one of those where on the first watch I really 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 dug this. I think it's so I'm looking real quickly. Joseph Minion had wrote the movie. I'm gonna see, he wrote Vampire's Kiss and a couple other things, but nothing like gigantic in terms of like film production. And like it's such a tight script, it's I think like right at or a little bit over 90 minutes.
Perfect length.
Perfect length. It immediately throws you in on that action where you pick it up and he's at his job, and then 5 minutes later you have like this wonderful scene where he's training this guy, and the guy's talking about how he like is just going to do this job for a little while, and then he's gonna, you know, get into like the publishing world. And Griffin Dunn's character is like, I mean, yeah, okay, well, like what are you planning to do? And he like describes this whole plan to like make like a publishing company that everybody can kind of be involved with, but then he can eventually like sell off and join like the actual publishing world, which I just kind of laughed at because I'm like, that's just kind of like uh, people with like very powerful like blogs or Substacks or stuff like that. It's like they do that for a while and then they sell it off so that they can go into some bigger job. But then it completely rolls into like this whole disintegrating night, and like the way that they frame it where it's just kind of like hit after hit after hit after hit, and you just have all these kind of strange characters popping up in Soho. Honestly, like after seeing the Edgar Wright movie, which this is a different Soho, but the Last Night in Soho movie, which is kind of the same, not necessarily the same premise, but also just like a um you know, strange characters all kind of
Mm.
appearing in this one location. I'm like, no, honestly, like After Hours is the real Last Night in Soho. Like it's just he's constantly running into different faces, whether it's Cheech and Chong or it's Catherine O'Hara at one point. Will Patton has this super small role, Terry Garr. And it's just all like, I love that every character in this like is so serious about this kind of their odd monotonous like duty. You know, like you have the John Hurd character who is this bartender at this bar that he goes to,
Mm.
and like the demeanor that he has toward Griffin Dunn is just like he's very serious about what's happening. And then what happens over the course of the movie is there's constantly like just something kind of coming up. You have like this central story around Griffin Dunn and Rosanna Arquette's character, who's the woman who he meets at the coffee shop, and that kind of connects everything together to an extent. But honestly, like just that like that lack of connection and just him going going to these different spaces with these different strange, you know, um just kind of unique people is highly entertaining. Like it's just 90 minutes of him wandering around and then the movie ends, which I think on the surface sounds really boring, but like Scorsese is able to kind of create like this almost um sci-fi is not the right word, but like just kind of this almost like alternate universe. But at the same time, it feels very like true to like 80s New York, in a way that I really found to be incredibly endearing and very breezy. Like this movie like moves really quickly. Nazeeh, I know you saw this for the first time a couple months ago. What are your thoughts on After Hours?
Yeah, I'd say it's an easy like top 10 Scorsese.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of like the best art is just when you're not even like thinking about it. Because didn't he make this while he was making another movie, like in his off time, or like while he was? I feel like he was making this during. He was making this during a movie. I don't know which movie, but he was. I remember reading about that.
I'm looking now. It looks like, I mean, you know, Goodfellas came a couple years later. Um, oh, probably The Color of Money.
Yeah, it was like some big production. It was like a big production, a movie.
Yeah, maybe that or like New York Stories. Wait, we're not doing good fact checking on this, but I'll go with you.
Um, but yeah, no, I love it for a lot of the same reasons. I remind me again how they first meet. Like they're at the coffee shop, and
He's like reading a book, and she kind of like mentions about the book, and they just kind of strike. It's a very like uh it's just a kind of small conversation, but she says something about how her roommate is making like these paper mache, these like these not paper mache. She's making paper mache later, but like these desk weight things, and she's like, if you
yeah.
want a desk weight,
Oh,
call
that's
me.
right. Yeah. Um, so like when characters meet, I feel like that's a hard thing to make it feel like kind of natural and like serendipitous, but that's
Hmm.
exactly like what happens. And I just feel like every guy wants that to happen in their life.
Yeah.
And that's just like and it happens to him, and it feels like this really just like spontaneous magical thing. And and then just what it ends up actually being is just like so not what he signed up for.
Yeah. Well, it's also, you think of going back to kind of how we view Scorsese in more of like a canonical sense. Like you think of like Goodfellas and Casino, and even more recently like The Irishman, where it's like these like wide-ranging like epics that are trying to like capture this world over the course of like multiple years. And I like with this one, kind of to your point, that it's kind of smaller just because I feel like he completely captures this world and this character and everything. He's able to like capture that scope within 90 minutes on like a smaller scale, which I always appreciate as well. Is like the fact that you're able to encapsulate this entire universe all within this kind of tightly written script for 97 minutes is kind of nice, especially if you're Martin Scorsese, who's known for much, bolder, broader things.
Yeah, and it very much feels like a movie that is just a few degrees separated from like his own reality at the time.
Hmm.
Like a lot of like the people and the characters feel like people he actually knows, or like they're based off of people he knows.
Hmm.
And you mentioned how like all the characters are very serious about what they do,
Hmm.
and that made me think of just about how like you didn't want to use the word like science or the term science fiction,
Hmm.
but the like everyone was a part of a scene, and each scene like a cultural scene of New York at the time. And he
Yeah.
was just like bouncing from like lifestyles to lifestyles, and they were like much more pronounced. I feel like the New York 80s like cultural scene was like really multifaceted, right? There's like a lot going on,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of a nice like odyssey through it.
Yeah, well, it's just like because Griffin Dunn's character constantly has like this frenet, like especially as the night goes on, like this frantic energy, just kind of like this. I just want to get home, and like they always stay like at the same level of just like like he's not accepting the vibes that are there. There's like
Yeah, he's
just
like
roll with it,
he's so neurotic.
yeah.
And like and he's a square, like he's a square, and all these
Mhm.
people around him are just like strange and like kind of eclectic and funny, but they're just like being themselves. And he like is very much not like I wouldn't say he has like an identity crisis, but it's just much ill, like it's more ill defined than all the characters around him.
Yeah, well, that's what's kind of funny is that like he's supposed to be who we latch on to, but like yeah, he as you said, like he doesn't really have a definition for himself really. But then all these people are, you could say are stranger or or weirder than he is, but at the same time they know who they are. Like you think of like
Yeah.
the roommate of the woman who he meets, like
Hmm.
she just is very confident and like this is who I am, this is my personality, and like there's something like when they first meet, Griffin Dunn's kind of like trying to not like seduce her, but he's trying to kind of hit on her,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of funny because like she definitely reads that, but and she kind of just lets him do what she wants, but she's constantly in control. And that's what's interesting about all these characters. They're very defined, not only just like how they're written, but just they know who they are, and that's almost what seems strange about them compared to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have not seen After Hours, I would recommend it. Like I said, it's on Criterion Channel now, but it's been bouncing. It's been on like Amazon and stuff like that. I'm glad I finally got around to it, and it's a very again, it's a very breezy 90 95 minute watch. And again, I think I agree with you. They would rank among my top Scorsese movies for sure. I'd rather watch this than no offense, Goodfellas. But I'm also on like the I'm not as into Goodfellas as other people are. So
It's been a long time since I've seen Goodfellas. I'd be interested to see how I feel about it now. I still imagine loving it, but just placing it in like the context of all his other movies, like
it's
at this
really
point.
it's really like it's one of those things. Not to go on a whole other thing, like it's really fun. Like there's fun parts of it. Like you can understand why people like it. I just find it to not be as like interesting as other stuff, like especially if we're going to talk about gangster movies. I'm much more interested in like the insides of The Irishman, which is more like kind of questioning all that than. And I've also become a big more of a fan of like late period Scorsese, like Silence and Shutter Island, and things like that. I recently like rewatched The Departed, which is another one that I'm like, it's fun, but I'm not super interested in like the interior of this movie. I'm much more interested in like, the kind of strange offbeat stuff that he's also doing like After Hours.
Yeah. I saw um what's the one with De Niro? He like just got out of prison.
Cape Fear.
Um yeah, I saw Cape Fear and that blew me away.
Hmm.
Like people don't talk about Cape Fear like as much as they should, I feel like.
Hmm.
Um
That's another one that kind of they say is underrated. I need to watch that one as well.
that movie's incredible. It's like it's really sick. Like it's a sick film
Hmm.
and it's like dark in a way that like you say is like far more interesting than I'd say Goodfellas. Like it like easily became one of my favorite movies of his. And yeah, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend
Cool.
it.
All right. Let's move on to our other one night of debauchery movie. This is honestly a favorite of mine. So,
Yeah, Mikey and Nicky, Elaine May's film from this is from 1976.
hmm,
It was playing at a theater that I volunteer at that was having a Peter Falk series, and this was the last one that was playing. Um, Apparently, this movie was like kind of obscure for a while, and it like
yeah.
has recently like appreciated like a cultural reevaluation, and I can totally see why. I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about this movie, and I immediately loved it as soon as it was over. Any movies that just like place you right in the middle of a situation
Hmm.
and like it just starts going. Like I love that. I've only seen John Cassavetes in one other movie as far as being an actor, which
Hmm.
was Rosemary's Baby, and I thought he was like he's very good in that movie,
Hmm.
but this is just like a different like register that I like just how unhinged he is like as soon as the movie starts. Like I was terrified the whole time like of anything he would do. I've never really experienced like that type of volatility in a performance before,
Hmm.
and it just like it just like gripped me the whole time. Like no matter what was happening, uh, I was just like completely just like enthralled.
That's another one where like the whole energy of the movie is just like you described, like he's volatile the entire time, and then you have Peter Falk who's just like calm down, like come on, just like let's just go over here, like he's just like constantly trying to. It's honestly the perfect encapsulation if you've ever had to like babysit a drunk friend. Um,
Yeah,
that's what this movie's energy is for a lot of the time. There's like weird emotional moments where you guys start like you have like moments and you're just like okay, like just let's sober up a little bit, but then also like you're chasing him around, like having to like calm, just constantly go like please chill out, like just get on the bus.
yeah. And what's even more terrifying is like instead of them being drunk, that's just their like emotional like mo,
Yeah,
right?
that's how they
Like
roll.
that's just them, right? And Peter Falk is a person I've like recently started watching movies in. I've just recently found out about like how much people love Columbo.
Hmm.
Uh and so he has it's funny that he had I mean I think it's great, but as far as just like he's had this whole career of being such a like a screen presence, he's a very interesting face.
Hmm.
And his eyes, one of his eyes kind of just like hangs differently, like is
Hmm.
in a different direction
Hmm.
than his other eye. And it's I've seen all the Marvels with him, and it's not as noticeable in that movie because he's not as manic in it. But
Hmm.
when he's trying to like rein in John Cassavetes, I just feel like it accentuates just how manic the movie is.
Yeah.
Like, like it's he's like they don't really make leading men like him anymore.
Well, they wouldn't like. I don't know. It would be tough to like have a character like that. I think if like also Cassavetes and Falk and Ben Gazzara and husbands that are just like they're not super likable. Like they're just difficult. like frustrating people, and like you have to sit there like in Mikey and Nicky, you have to sit there just with them the entire time. And you think about like, I don't know, I don't see that happening today. Even, I'm thinking of something like Marriage Story with Adam Driver, and like he like there's like that whole friction between the two characters, Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's character, but like I don't think there's ever a moment where where Adam Driver is just so awful that you just like don't just like he's just kind of despicable. And like there's so many moments in this movie
Oh
where
yeah,
they just fucking suck. And like, but they still are they're still the characters you have to pay attention to.
yeah, and like again, like at no point in Marriage Story am I afraid of anybody's reaction, right?
Yeah,
Like I'm not afraid of just like how like intense and unpleasant it's gonna be, even though it's like a deeply unpleasant movie as far as what's happening to these
sure.
characters.
Hmm.
Um, but like, god damn, John Cassavetes. And like again, like as someone who's been in like a friendship like that, like it just really hit. It just
Yeah.
really, really hit. Um, and I'm so happy we ended up getting, the version that Elaine May like desired, because there's that whole like
Hmm.
production like drama after it was made, because I guess it went like far, like it went over budget and like past the deadline, and so the caveat of like her having like final like creative control was her like turning it in on time.
Hmm.
So Warner Brothers like wouldn't let her release it, like her
Yeah.
version. And I just like that, like I just can't imagine how horrible that would be as like an artist. Like I mean, it happens all the time, and like I would be so fucking upset.
Yeah, going into like if you look at like the history of just Elaine May with her movies post Heartbreak Kid, we talked about it when we did an episode on New Leaf, but that like what you see when you watch the movie New Leaf is not the version that she necessarily wanted. They did a bunch of like work on it. And the same with Mikey and Nicky, as well as Ishtar. Like those were just kind of fraught productions that a lot of the time it was the studio just kind of going, not really letting her have free, carte blanche on whatever she wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
But no, this is one I also really like it because it, again, she comes from that comedy background. It also is funny. It's super depressing and tough at times, but then you also, like I was telling you before we started, you also have like the Ned Beatty character, who is,
Mm-hmm.
for those who don't know the story, like or have seen the movie, like Ned Beatty's character was hired to kill John Cassavetes because Cassavetes' character took money from the mob, and so Peter Falk's character is there pretty much to kind of like give him a night, and then he's going to deliver him so that he can get killed. And like the whole movie is, you have volatile, frantic John Cassavetes not committing to going anywhere. You have Peter Falk, who's trying to like wrangle him in and bring him to the location so that they can like pull off the job. And you have Ned Beatty, who's just like driving around the entire time, just going, "Where the fuck is this guy? Like, I just need to do my job." And it's just like, I don't like, it's a it's totally fucked and like terrible situation. But there's just something funny about like the way that they're unable to like get all the things together. Like it's constantly just a fraught venture that in the end they just kind of like give up, and it's super messy. No, I don't know, I love that movie so much.
Yeah, and like you at no point this is gonna end well.
Hmm.
Like you're just watching until it happens. And this is like very clearly like a big influence on the Safdies.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
like this is, I mean, they clearly like are very influenced by this movie, and for good reason.
Yeah, just the whole central, this is going to end badly kind of feeling of it feels
Yep.
very akin to especially like Uncut Gems, just like the Adam Sandler character there.
Yeah, and very much good time as well. Like
Mhm.
just one night, awful, wrong, just terrible decisions that ends terribly.
Absolutely. Well, Mikey and Nicky is available on Criterion. It used to be on the Criterion channel, but I'm sure it'll. I also saw it on like Amazon Prime just randomly, like it was just randomly there. So if you've not seen it, definitely check it out.
It's also on HBO Max, I believe.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
go watch Mikey and Nicky. It's fantastic. Well, it's not. It's maybe call a friend afterwards and have a moment. You'll get emotional, but it's a good time.
Yeah, no, watch it.
It's a good time. All right. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we will be back talking about another good time, which is A City of Sadness. After this, we're gonna be talking about how half your
Taiwan.
family just disappears.
Yeah, Taiwan's been in the trenches forever.
Oh.
How like familiar were you with these historical and political events before this movie? Because I was not.
Not at all.
Okay, all right. So yeah, because it's always wild when you find out about something, and it was like this major historical event that affected like millions of people. It's like, oh, I've never heard of
Yeah.
this, and it's just
Yeah, that's I just chalk that up to being in America.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, it was very interesting though, just kind of, and I like and we can talk about it, but I like that the movie like it engages with it, but it also is like kind of it's more just like the residual effects of all. It's not about all that. It's the residual
It's
effects of that on other people.
it's happening, but it's not what the movie's about. It's about like a lot of things. It's yeah, it's one of its best qualities, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
It's a big reason why it worked for me. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Um, it was the first Taiwanese movie to win the Golden Lion at the Venice Film
I
Festival.
I was just reading about that. I mean, for good reason.
Yeah. It was I couldn't find any information about it, but it was interesting. I was like looking for, the like contemporary reviews of it. There was a New York Times one, but they were being assholes and I couldn't work.
What?
They were being assholes and I couldn't work around the paywall. So I didn't
Oh, I thought you meant
they
they were being assholes in the writing. I'm like, what are they saying about the
yeah.
movie?
No, that's not shocking either. I'm sure that
Well,
was
that's the thing. I like that is a thing that happens in the New York Times, so I could see them like saying some bullshit about. Huh?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm generally not into New York Times movie reviews, but no, it was interesting because the only other ones I could find was like 2013, 2014. So I just wonder if they like did a re-release of it in America around that time. Because like the New Yorker wrote about it and all the Chicago papers wrote about it. So I just
Oh,
wonder if
okay.
around that time they like re-released it in theaters or something. But it was, I mean, I don't know if you watched it online. I watched it through the Internet Archive, but it was very difficult to find.
Oh, it's on there.
Yeah, they had a pretty decent a decent version with English subs on Internet Archive, but that was literally the
Okay.
best version I could find.
I watched a DVD rip, and it's not great. I wouldn't be surprised if we watched the same copy. Um,
Maybe.
real quick, I'm a part of a Discord that has like a really insane like resource of like film links.
Oh,
So if you're ever
really?
looking for something, let me know, and there's a good chance
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
there.
Okay, I'll do that because yeah, like that's the issue with like this series is sometimes there's movies that we definitely want to see, but then like we don't want to necessarily watch something that's super unavailable. But I'm just like watching this movie and I'm just surprised that this is something that like a Criterion or Kino Lorber or something hasn't picked up.
No, it needs like a restoration and like a complete like theatrical like redistribution.
Hmm.
Um, it'll very much find like an audience. I don't know who's like
I don't know
getting
either.
around
Yeah,
to that, but yeah, it needs to happen. Like that's what I kept thinking the whole time. Like the movie can really use a restoration.
because like all of the factors. It's not like you have Tony Lung's in it. You have Ho was that Ho Xiaoshin? Yeah, Ho
Hou
Xiaoshin.
Hsiao-Hsien. I looked up the pronunciation today. It's Hou
Ho
Hsiao-Hsien.
Ho Xiaoshin. Like I mean, he's a well-known director. It's not like he's just somebody. He's done a bunch of other stuff, so it's not like he's just a nobody. I'm just like I don't know. Like it seems
He's
like an obvious.
yeah. Like first Taiwanese movie to win the Golden Lion, and like the Wikipedia like page like cites it as like people like calling it like Ho's like masterpiece,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if this is like, you know, his like a high watermark for him, it must be like a rights issue. Like I can't imagine someone's not working on it right now. Like it's too important.
Yeah, people watching, figure it out. Because it makes like I'm just like this seems like an obvious Criterion pick or something like that.
He's, I mean, I'd say he's like easily like top 5 most known like Taiwanese directors.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're talking about like him and Edward Yang kind of jump
Yeah,
started a lot of new Taiwanese cinema, and you're just like
yeah,
those two. I'm like, you have a lot of Edward Yang stuff already, like in Criterion and such. So I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway,
They'll get to it. He's slowly been getting like Masters of Cinema has like a lot of his shit. Not a lot, but a handful of his stuff. So
yeah, I don't know. It was very surprising to me that it was so like crazily unavailable.
yeah, 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 yeah.
All right, cool. You ready?
Let's do it.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 371 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be concluding our Young Critics Watch All Movies series with 1989's A City of Sadness, directed by Hou Hsiao-Hsien, from a script by Chu Tai-wen and Wu Ningjin. The film stars Tony Leung, Shin Song-yoon, Sung Young-chin, Jack Kao, and Shin Su-fin. Soon after Japan relinquishes control of Taiwan in 1945, the Lin brothers face hardships from the changing culture. Bar owner Wen Hyung, the eldest brother, falls foul of local gangsters. Wen's son disappears, and Wen Lung, scarred by his experiences in the war, ends up in an insane asylum. Deaf-mute photographer Wen Xing, the youngest brother, decides to make a stand and fight the nationalist government from China that is assuming power. City of Sadness was the first of 3 Taiwanese films to win the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival. The film was regarded as the first installment in a trilogy of Xiaoxin's films that deal with Taiwanese history, which also includes The Puppet Master from 1993 and Good Men, Good Women from 1995. City of Sadness was filmed on location in Zhufeng, a former Japanese and declined gold mining town that continued to operate in the post-war period until the 1960s. Zhufeng is located in the northeast of Thailand, an area isolated from the rest of the Taipei County and Yilan County. There are only rough county roads and a local commuter railway line connecting Zhufeng to the outside world, which designated a low priority for urban revitalization and land development. Zhufen's hillside communities were constructed before the modern zoning codes were put in place. So therefore, it provided a small Taiwanese town feeling and atmosphere that symbolized the historical period that is presented in the plot of the movie. Ho remembers the town fondly as he traveled to Zhufen through a tourist gaze when he was young. The shooting of the scenes of train travel to Zhufen particularly invoked his nostalgic rhetoric and joyful memories of a high school trip there with his school friends. Xiaoxin noted that the train in Taiwan is a very important mode of transportation, and he would ride the train a lot. It's very hard for him to forget the connection between him and the train and trains. Therefore, the train tracks appear multiple times in film. By the 1980s, the new Taiwanese cinema movement was moving towards not just creating films for the people of Taiwan, but also for a larger international audience. Directors like Hou Hsiao-Hsien, as well as Edward Yang, noted that they wanted to emulate the popularity of Hong Kong cinema, which revolved around high-quality productions with strong star power to back it up. In The City of Sadness, Xiaoxin relied primarily on foreign investment, particularly from Japan. Japanese technology, techniques, and facilities were used in the post-production and resulted in what critic and producer Zhang Hongzi described as an aspect of high quality that could drive an international viewership. Hou Hsiao-Hsien was interested in creating a film that could tell a story about a family, specifically during the 228 incident and the White Terror, by a few reasons. He cited how the death of Ching Kyo in 1988 and the lifting of martial law the year prior made it an appropriate time to address the 228 incident, which Hsiao-Hsien felt had been covered up by the government. He noted how books were not available on the subject, and he wanted to provide a vantage point about the story through the lens of a family. He wrote, quote, "Everybody knew about the 228 incident. Nobody would say anything, at least in public, but behind closed doors, everyone was talking about it, especially in the Tang Wai movement. The 228 incident was already known, so I was more interested in filming a time of transition and the changes in a family during a change in regime. This is the main thing I wanted to capture. There's been too much political intervention. We should go back to history itself for a comprehensive reflection, but politicians like to use this tragedy as an ATM, making a withdrawal from it whenever they want. It's which I love that that whole comparison. It's
Yeah.
awful. So no matter what point of view I took with the film, people would still criticize it. I was filming events that were still taboo. I had a point of view, and no matter what, I was filming from the point of view of people in a family. Of course, it's limited by the filmmaker's vision and attitude. I can only present a part of the atmosphere of the time. In 2014, the New Yorker said Hou's extraordinarily controlled and well constructed long takes blend revelation and opacity. His favorite trope is to shoot through doorways as if straining to capture the action over impassable spans of time. And in 2014, the Chicago Recorder said, "A City of Sadness is a great film, one that will be watched as long as there are people who care about the movies as an art." So, on that note, I guess let's talk a little bit about just kind of our familiarity. This is I've seen.
I'll
I don't
definitely
know
have
if
to
I
pull up.
actually. I don't know if I actually ever finished The Assassin. I'll be honest. So this is. I'm going to count this as kind of my first Hou Hsiao-Hsien movie in full. But Nazeeh, I mean, what's your familiarity with him as kind of a director?
I saw The Assassin first, like I felt a lot of people did,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was very gorgeous, if not a little reserved and cold as far as just like a viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, no one can like deny like the craftsmanship and the artistry going on, but I didn't really connect with it. And I maybe that's just because it's not the best entry point for Hou
Yeah.
Hsiao-Hsien. Um, After that, the movie I saw after, which I really, really love, is Daughter of the Nile. Um, that was my first introduction to Ho's use of like doorway cinematography,
Mm-hmm.
which I really love. It is like the perfect kind of like context as like a viewer, like you're like viewing in on like people's lives, and it feels
Mm-hmm.
kind of like voyeuristic. And so Daughter of the Nile is really, really wonderful. Uh, and then I've also seen The Time to Live and The Time to Die. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful, like, semi autobiographical movie about how Hou Hsiao-Hsien was a badass kid. Like, he was a badass kid. And it's really wild to watch it. Like, viewing him now is like one of the greatest like directors to like ever do it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then so after that was City of the Sadness. So this is my fourth movie by him, and I've loved 3 out of the 4. So
Yeah. No, and I think that this is kind of a good for those who maybe are unfamiliar with him. This is probably a good entry point.
yeah, yeah, it
You
is.
know, like it's we can talk about it a little bit more in depth, but like we talked about this off mic, but like the kind of history around this movie, I wasn't super familiar with the 228 incident that I was mentioning that he was
Same,
talking about,
yeah.
which is portrayed a bit like in the beginning of this movie in terms of the of like people kind of disappearing and being killed. Um, but you know, there's a lot of this like Taiwanese history between, and they talk about it in the film. But they were China, they were under China for a very long time. Then they were under Japan, and then when Japan surrendered in World War II, they were given back to China. And this is when this movie kind of takes place, and like it's it seemed like again this is not the historical perspective. Like this is not a historian talking, but it kind of seemed like China was over there kind of establishing itself. You kind of had the Mao regime kind of coming into place, and then you had this more nationalistic government that was much more embedded around Taiwan, and they talk about it in the movie, but like the characters kind of feel like they're the kind of the outcasts, like they're kind of just chop liver to the Chinese government and the rest of them, where they have like these long conversations about how they kind of viewed themselves almost as slaves under the Japanese regime, but then in China they were supposed to like get kind of they're supposed to be afforded all these freedoms, and they kind of just still feel like they're unable to kind of live their lives as they want to. And I think that's what's really interesting about this movie is that it's not like a straight like historical biopic of like let's portray this incident so that you understand it. I like that Hou Hsiao-Hsien like frames it in here is a family that kind of comes from various socioeconomic levels, that's kind of just caught in the thick of this changing regime, and you see kind of like the trickle down of what the greater political thing is doing to people just on like this kind of basic living level. Like that was really, to me, that was the kind of most powerful thing about this movie, that it wasn't this giant statement, it was more just showing how politics kind of trickle down and affect just normal ass people.
Uh, yeah, he depicted this very like tumultuous like political and historical event uh in the way that a lot of people experience them, which is just as regular people. Um, a lot of times when like politics and history are like displayed in films, it's as um the delivery is like a politician or a historian is consuming
Mm-hmm.
the content, but no, it's regular people. And so he's like dramatizing history through this family and delivers it in this way that's like palatable, because instead of just like learning about the history or the events, it's how those events affected like the dispositions and the morale and like the mentalities of these people living like their day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really, it's like a perfect kind of marriage.
Well, it makes me think of a movie that I really loved from a few years ago, A Hidden Life, which is a little bit more overtly like dealing with a period of history. Because I mean, you get into more like overt, um, like the Nazis in World War II in that movie. But a lot of the first kind of act of that movie is, the Nazis are kind of this unseen kind of cloud in the distance, and a lot of that nationalism and ideology starting to creep into the town as it um, becomes more prominent in that area of Austria. And in like, that's what I really love about that movie, is like the first half of that movie is just this family kind of living its basic farm life and just kind of enjoying themselves. And then you start to see how people in the village change, how people kind of start talking, how they get much more emboldened by these ideas and these, and start kind of like voicing them. And this one's the kind of the same way, where you start to hear, it kind of is more, it's more tampered, it's more, you like have that scene early on where they're all around like the table and they're eating and drinking, and like political topics start kind of popping up, and they like go, let's not talk politics, let's drink more. And then it
Yeah,
becomes,
I have not seen the movie. Just I should put that out there. I missed it. But sorry to cut you off.
oh no, you're fine. And but I mean, no, in City of Sadness, like you have that.
Oh, sorry, got it. I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah,
I
yeah. No,
wasn't
you're
sure.
good. You have that scene early in where they're like, it's like them, it's the one brother, or
Yeah,
it's Tony
yeah, yeah,
Long and
yeah.
the friend. They're like around, and they're like talking. They're like, oh, let's talk. Let's not talk politics. Let's just drink. And like you
Right.
kind of have where like that stuff is kind of bubbling to the surface, but they kind of are constantly like going like, no, let's not really get into that. And it's interesting by the second half of the movie where that really becomes like the dominating force. Like you can't escape talking about what's happening around you in the country. And I think that's, I just, my overall point is like I always find it to be like an effective way of kind of conveying what is so tragic about all of this.
Yeah. again, it's this really humane like delivery of how people generally feel towards politics, political issues, social issues. It's like we really mostly just want to live our lives and not think about these things
Mm-hmm.
until they affect us in a way where we're forced to. And the efficiency and like the effectiveness of voting is like a whole different conversation. But just like I feel like a lot of people like were um, galvanized to vote in like the last uh, two presidential cycles
Mm-hmm.
than they ever were in their lives, and that's just because things had gotten to such a severe state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the wild thing about this movie, and one of like I think the really magical aspects of like what cinema can like provide, is that this was like this was apparently like the first movie to deal with these events, and so
Yeah.
the public was largely like he said, like everyone knew what like it happened, but no one was really talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And now you and I are watching this, however many years later, and at this point, all this information is very available to you and I, but we're still learning about it through this movie, which is how a lot of people learned about it at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And so, like that makes this movie like effective, like regardless of like what year it is.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Like it's kind of one of those like I prefaced at the top, like I'm still incredibly ignorant on
Yeah.
this historical moment, but like I think it like to your point, it's so effective of like displaying those kind of more personal levels that you understand on that level, like how you can empathize with what they're dealing with. Like that's what's so effective about Tony Lung's character just over the course of the movie, like how his demeanor and how he kind of goes about things, it changes. I think of like a scene early in the movie where it's another scene similar to what I was describing earlier, where they're all in the room kind of eating and drinking, talking about
Hmm.
politics, and they cut over to Tony Lung, who's kind of on the side with the woman who he eventually marries, and like they're having this kind of like really cute, like kind of flirty back and forth.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes, you went from this very serious, like we need to do this about the nationalist government, to like this really flirty kind of like moment between these two. And that show like it's kind of just like the stark reminder that like while this stuff is going on, like he's just somebody who's kind of focused on living his life. Like that seems to be the frustration that his eldest brother has about him, is he's just like, all this stuff's happening and you're just wanting, he doesn't seem as motivated to get involved. And, um, that's just like, again, that's just kind of the tragedy of it. Like he just wants to live his life and take his photos and live with his, beautiful wife. And he kind of gets captured, caught up in all of these kind of this whole political sphere. And eventually with is imprisoned because of it.
Yeah. All of early Tony Lung's scenes like threw me off in this really strange way where okay, so he's deaf, and whenever he's communicating with the woman he's smitten with, he's writing on this notepad, and what they're saying to each other like pops up on a screen like title cards from a silent movie.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the music that's playing is really sweet. It's really like happy sounding.
Hmm.
And when that's playing and we're reading the title cards, like I feel like I'm watching a different movie. Like I feel like I'm watching like a Buster Keaton like slapstick movie.
Hmm.
Not slapstick, but just like the
It has those kind of like those like kind of, you think of like the romancy moments from like a Chaplin movie where he's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
that's what I'm getting
like
at.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. um and it's not like the tonal shifts aren't jarring. Like it's very seamless, and like it makes sense when you're watching it. It doesn't it doesn't jar you in any way, which I think is really impressive from
Well, it's
Ho.
and it's such a stark. I was thinking while I was watching this that I just really enjoyed any of the sequences with Tony Lung and kind of his sphere.
Yeah.
I really never I never really got into the eldest brother who owns the bar, who's kind of in league with the gangsters. Like honestly, like that really just, I don't know, like that never was really all that compelling to me. Then you have the other brother who's in the asylum. who's kind of like in between the two of them. He's not really as prominent. It kind of feels like it's between the youngest brother Tony Leung and the oldest brother. But like those scenes were never all that compelling. But like there's something about just like that kind of small town, small village
Mhm.
life that you see portrayed for the majority of the movie with him that really captures you.
I like 100% agree with you. It's but the I think one of the reasons why the movie is better than it would be otherwise is
Hmm.
because like so those scenes you just described with like his older brother and like the gang activity,
Hmm.
I wouldn't change or take away anything from the movie
Hmm.
because like as I'm watching, like I'm clearly like anchored to Tony Leung's character, right?
Hmm.
And so all of these external scenes, at least as far as like my enjoyment, just provide further like context to what he's going through.
Sure,
Like this is
absolutely.
just more details on Tony Leung's life. This is what he's dealing with while he's trying to live his life,
Mhm.
and that just further fleshes out like his own like interiority because that's what he's dealing with.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that because I mean, you have to have those older brother scenes because he's somebody who's like he's somebody who clearly sees the change in regime as an opportunity to better, get more money and grow
Mm-hmm.
and find some prosperity. And you have to have that as the counter to Tony Lung's character, who, like we said, is completely content with like being out in his little village shooting photos and just doing that stuff. And you kind of have to have those two where it shows that yeah, it makes sense that what happens to the older brother happens to the older brother, but you would think that Tony Lung wouldn't have to deal with that because he's not the same, he's not doing the same thing. He's not putting himself in harm's way. But I think
Right.
that the takeaway is that no, everybody is in harm's way in this situation, and that no matter what lifestyle you're living, you're still, you know, and you're still a target to this government.
Yeah. Yeah. I whenever I'm watching, like as an American, like
Hmm.
we can never relate to like another country's government just like controlling us and like being in charge of like our lives.
Well,
Um,
yeah, at least in this sense, because usually, like
yeah,
we would be that controlling. We would be
yeah.
we are
We,
that controlling
uh,
apparatus.
yes, what you were talking about at the beginning, as like when you were kind of breaking down like how they were under Japan and they went back to China,
Hmm.
and like even though they went back to China, like it still felt like every time I hear about like the relationship, it always just sounds and like take this with a grain of salt, given like what I don't know about the
Hmm.
history, but it just always feels very imperialistic,
Hmm.
uh, as like China Taiwan.
Well, and again, maybe this is an unfair kind of like analogy, but it kind of seems like the whole like kind of you think of like the countries, especially around the Cold War, in like Eastern Europe and such, they were under Soviet communism, and is that any better or worse than being under American imperialism? It's kind of like you could
Yeah,
say you switched hands from, oh well, we got the Americans in charge of us now instead of the Soviets. And you're like, yeah, but I mean, has the quality of life changed? I mean, that's kind of the thing they're always questioning, is has our quality of life change? You have that whole conversation between them before the whole, like, the scene I was talking about earlier with Tony Lung, where they're talking about, there's no employment. There's they're getting rid of people's jobs, and changing, they're changing judges from the people who have been in town as the judge forever to people related to the
hmm,
magistrates that from China. It's like, um, so you would think, oh well, like we're not under the thumb of the Japanese government, and so that we'll have more freedoms. But actually, the Chinese government just kind of came in and took over everything, and kind of it made it more limited than they thought it was going to be. And so it's kind of like you're dancing with one of the devils, and neither of them are good.
yeah. Do you think like there's a like a very particular reason this movie was funded by like Japanese investors?
That was a weird caveat. Yeah. You know, I don't know. I'm just kind of pulling something out of my ass here, but I think Japan has a little bit more foresight towards, or at least perspective on their past than, like, I wouldn't see like the US doing something like this or Russia doing something like this. I think Japan is a little bit more, especially just with how World War II ended for them and kind of what that meant to their culture, like what it was, what the effects it had on their culture and their economy and everything like that. Like there was just such a culture shock after that that they really had to kind of come to terms with. And so maybe that, if maybe that had something to do with it. At the same time, I don't know, it could also be, you know, knowing how petty these things are, it could have just been a fuck you to China. We don't know.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Just definitely something to think about.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to talk about, you know, you mentioned that it had all of these Japanese influences, but they talked a little bit about like the doorway shots, and you also kind of have like these pillow shots of like I mentioned, like the train and like the train there in the village and things like that. Like there is, this movie also kind of has this somewhat of a kinship with like Yasuhiro Ozu films, where it doesn't have necessarily like those a ton of those super quiet moments where just they're there and doing stuff, but you still do, like there's a lot of there's a lot of those pillow shots, there's a lot of those just kind of looking at, you kind of just set the camera still and you kind of just get enveloped into like the nature. You have a lot of like the doorway shots where people are kind of eating and you're just kind of observing that. It was interesting that like you really did get this kind of, at least for me, I got a lot of these Ozu vibes
Mhm.
while watching a lot of these scenes throughout the film. Is that something you picked up on?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, like stationary shots from like pretty far away. Was there ever like a tight close up at any point?
I
Because
don't think so. A lot
I
of them,
don't think I don't think so either. Like
there wasn't
most of
any
them,
like tatami level shots, but it was, I mean, it was pretty much that like medium shot behind the doorway that he favored.
yeah, and it's just really pleasant compositions that are just filled with uh really interesting mise en scene as far as
Hmm.
characters moving around. There's a lot of movement among the characters as far as just like all the dinner scenes and all of just like the brothers
Hmm.
during like their gangster activities.
Those were also that were always really interesting because he shot it. He almost set it up with like it almost looked like the Last Supper at times, because you would just have
Hmm.
like this kind of straight table and they would be all around it. And like you have that one scene where you have like a woman and then gangster and then woman and then gangster woman, and like and the guys, the one gangster just starts yelling about why are there so many women in here. We're talking about business. But it's just like the composition of it where you just kind of have like, again, prostitute, gangster, prostitute, and like just that whole composition of how he kind of set up the scene, and like they're like trying to have business around this game, and all these kind of prostitutes who are just kind of sitting there not sure really what to do other than just kind of smile. um there was something like really, I don't know, that always interesting about the way he would set up those sequences when he would kind of check in on the gangster activity.
Yeah, it, he he almost set them up in a way where like this character's about like none of his characters are like comfortable. Like they're always
Hmm.
in movement. They're always like in flux. Well, not any of them, but like all the gangster characters,
Yeah.
as opposed to like the Tony Lung scenes, which are like kind of serene, a lot more still.
Well, and he's I mean, he's also kind of in movement because you think about a lot of his, especially his early scenes. He, like the what's happening is happening over here, and he's always like kind of like getting food or getting a drink and like kind of moving and like kind of helping to serve them. Like he's never stationary engaged in like the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, really, really good shit.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. What did you so what did you make of the ending? Like the ending, you kind of have this ending where Tony Lung's character kind of just kind of disappears because he's imprisoned. And you have this really, talking about like the Ozu shots, you have this wonderful medium shot where it's it's in this, it's at this table that you've seen a number of times to this point in this 2 hour and 40-minute runtime of like characters, usually the oldest brother and the dad sitting there just kind of eating. And to me there was something really like poignant about like that final shot where you see the dad sitting there eating, and I think it's one of the brothers or somebody associated, like one of the friends of the brothers or something, kind of eating as well. And it's just kind of like it's this familiar setup that you've seen over and over and over and over again, but this time it's just a little bit different. And it kind of it kind of sits in and sets home that again, like we're talking about these subtle changes, like this will stay the same, but the faces and the people involved in it change just because of the nature of life.
Yeah. Um, like remind me as far as Tony Lung's character, like is he like indefinitely imprisoned?
Yeah, I mean, they don't say if he like dies or anything in prison, but he gets capped. He gets taken in by the nationalist government, the Chinese nationalist government, because his wife writes about it in that letter. And that's what the last scene we see with him is they're taking that family photo. Um,
Oh right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but the last scene is they're at that table that I think it's at the elder brother's house. And he kind of has like that far back shot, and it's like you kind of have the table kind of in the background, and you have a couple doors in front of it. And I think it's like I said, I think it's one of the brothers, or it's just like one of the friends of the brothers, because you've seen him a bunch of times, and it's the dad. They're just sitting there eating, and you've had a couple scenes like that where the eldest brother's eating and the dad sitting there eating with him, and they're talking about stuff. But like to me, it was really poignant because it was just like after all of this stuff, like they're still in that same movement cycle that you've seen them doing throughout the movie, but this time, a couple of the faces are different because that's things have changed, even though this 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 familiar act of like eating at this table has not changed.
Yeah, I'm just it I kept thinking about the title the whole time of the movie, like
Mm-hmm.
a city of because like I just wasn't sure how I felt by the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell like if like sadness was the thing I was feeling at that point.
I saw. Let me see if I can pull it up on Letterbox. I saw a really a good review that kind of put into perspective. Yeah, I think it's by Matt Lynch, who is
Oh yeah.
known on. And he says, unable to hear or speak, or scarred by war, or exiled from home, everyone is scattered, and none of these characters is exactly whole. Entire generations now fundamentally incapable of just being. And that's another one by Sean Gilman was reminded me this time not only of A Brighter Summer Day, which is Edward Yang. In many
Mhm.
ways, it's perfect companion and counterpoint, but also of Fort Apache, a generation of men wiped out and driven mad, with only the women left to carry on and tell their stories. And that kind of reconfigured a little bit, kind of how I was thinking about this movie, because it's true. Like you think of, I don't know if you've seen Fort Apache,
No, I haven't.
but like that and Red River are good, like deconstructing American mythology movies, because it's like you have these, so something like Red River, it's Howard Hawks, you have John Wayne, you kind of have like these figures that um, but it also like has this kind of melancholy to it of like they're holding on to this myth, they're holding on to this legend, they're holding on to this
Mhm.
past that's clearly like not only slipping away, it's just gone, like it's leaving. It's just the everything is changing and modernizing, and there's just not a role for them. But they're still kind of held on to this mythology, and like I think that's kind of like I understand that comparison for this, because it's like um you know all this whole family, you have a scene early on in the film where the eldest brother's talking about his family, and I think it's just right after their mom dies, and he talks about how she's left these four children, and it's like him. You have the brother who just like left and went to the Philippines. You have the one brother who's in the insane asylum, and then you have the Tony Leung character who's deaf and just kind of living his life. And I think like the sadness is at the end of this movie because of circumstances that had really nothing to fucking do with them. Like it was
Yeah.
all political bullshit that had nothing to do with them. They're scarred and their lives are just up. One is dead. You still don't know where the brother is in the Philippines. The one is still completely mentally scarred from the war, and Tony Leung is in jail. And it's just like all of that because of again, they didn't do anything. That it was nothing that they
Yeah.
like created. It was nothing that they instigated. It was just like this whole generation just kind of wiped out. Um, for
And for
for
what?
and for
Like,
what? Yeah, like
and
what?
for
Like
what?
why? What happened? So
I
I think that brought some perspective to it to me.
Yeah, everything you were just saying is when you think about how terrifying it is that the thing that like caused all of them like the various issues in their lives is like not even around anymore. Like it's
Mhm.
gone. Like
Exactly.
the people, the ideologies, like the culture, like you don't even have like something to point at that's like still around.
Yeah, and not to like let's get current events with this, but like it was making me think a little bit about like what we're going through today, where you have this pandemic, you just have like these political ambitions of people on both sides to like because they want to do this and they want to do that, and you're kind of you think of like the encroachment in like the future that we have with like something like climate change and like the reality that we have to live with in the next 20 to 30 years. And like it makes me unwilling to like really get invested in what's happening today, because I'm just like, you guys are sitting here in pissing contests against each other for stuff that who gives a shit, because in like 30 years we'll probably be burned alive by the climate that you've just kind of given the finger to for decades and decades. And it's just like, what was this all for? Like what was the point of all this stuff? Like you're just killing people for nothing. And like I think that's kind of that's the city of sadness is it's just you wiped out this whole generation, this whole family, and what the fuck was the point? Like what was it for?
Yeah, supposed people like that are like in positions that are like for like the masses, but
Hmm.
like any positive or negative thing that we get is like a consequence of like their own like vanity projects.
Hmm. It's all ego.
Yeah. And yeah, it feels bad, man.
Yeah, it's not like and that's where it's like there's it's kind of like, oh, that's the city of sadness. um
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like, I think both of those like kind of short reviews really did put it in perspective of like, you know, then you also have like the women character in this movie. Especially I really like the actress who played the wife of Tony Leung's character. Like
Me too. She was, yeah.
she really just has like this kind of innocence to her face, like she's never like she's constantly like kind of processing everything, but she also just kind of has like this her face almost is like is just going like, why can't like this just be easier? Like why can't this just be easier? And like you think of like the scene where he's describing to her his trip that he took out to go see that friend of theirs, who like is kind of hidden in the wood, hidden in the jungle, that he just is not going to come back because he just doesn't want to. He literally just doesn't want to be involved in like this whole political, um, you know, thing happening, and like the way that she just kind of like breaks down between that scene and like the scene when she breaks down when he brings her the message that says pretty much, he's going to jail or they're going to come for him.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about like it's not just sadness to it's her being sad to what she's like, she's not just reacting to it, but it's also like the sadness of like there's just this inability to just live normally. Like there's just constant like this constantly is just encroaching in her desire to just live her life normally.
Yeah, and she just has a really pleasant presence.
Hmm.
Like she very much like gives the energy of like a loyal, like ride or die like person in your life. Like
Hmm.
um yeah, I really really enjoyed her character too.
Yeah. Uh,
Um Sean Gilman's review makes me like I've had a brighter summer day like on my shelf for like however
Same.
long,
Yeah.
and I know like I'm gonna love every minute. Like the runtime isn't even an issue
Yeah. Well, I
because
know. I know. Also, if Nadine was here, she would also. I know Yi Yi was a big one for her, and so that's another Edward Yang. So between Brighter Summer Day and Yi Yi, like those are two that are definitely up on my list now, even though the run times are like 3 hours.
yeah, I I literally don't have like any particular reason, but I've only seen one Edward Yang. It's
Hmm.
The Terrorizers. I saw it years ago. It was like on Amazon. I'm like, let me just
Hmm.
watch this, and I immediately knew it was like very early in like my like serious film watching days. But I, it's one
Hmm.
of those things where like I saw that, and I just even without having the language to describe why, I'm just like, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
just immediately, just just incredible, just incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like the both like both of those. I definitely want to. I know also, in terms of Hou Hsiao-Hsien, Raise the Red Lantern. Andrew is a big uh, champion of that film, which is another one that's kind of tough to find. But I know he's a big fan of that one.
I believe that's Zhang Yimou.
Is it Zhang Yimou?
Yeah.
I'm getting it mixed up. I apologize. I'm
Uh,
getting so many,
no,
Hans
yeah, it
and
happens. Raise the Red Lantern has been hard to find for a while. This Australian boutique called Imprint just released or announced like a whole box set of his stuff. It's all his collaborations with the actress in those movies.
Mhm.
And I don't know her name. Shame on me, but that's a big deal because yeah, Razor Red Lantern like was available and like was not like in great condition for a long time, and this was the first like HD like public copy that I've ever heard of. Uh, I'm gonna find her name out of respect for
Yeah.
her.
Um, but for those, as we kind of wind down, for those interested in checking out A City of Sadness, I watched it on if you Google the Internet Archive, they had a decent cut of it with it, but at the very least, they had English subtitles. But we were talking about it off mic. This is kind of a difficult movie to find.
For
Really,
whatever reason.
yeah, I couldn't really find a reason why it was difficult to find, but it seems like a natural film for a Criterion or a Kino Lorber or something like that to pick up and kind of give a restoration and a re-release.
Yeah. By the way, her name is Gong Li. So there's a
Hmm.
whole sweet box set coming out at the like end of this year, with Zhang Yimou and Gong Li.
Nice. Um,
Yeah.
I saw the latest Zhang Yimou film at TIFF and was not super into it.
I have heard it's okay. He has like two new ones out, right? And the other one's supposed to be more interesting.
I watched the one I saw was the 1 second.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
pretty
not
much heard across the board. It's just it's whatever.
It's just like I don't. It's yeah. It's like about let's just go in a whole thing. Like no, it was like about this guy. It's like about like it's supposed to be about the love of movies and the importance of movies, and I don't really get that, or I
That's
didn't really get that.
that's really hard to make not like cheesy.
This one was yeah. It's like it's all about like this guy who. And you have like these orphans, and I don't know. It was just kind of you have this one guy who's literally named Mister Movie, who's a projectionist. It was just a whole. It was interesting.
Shout out to Obayashi and Hausu. Um, Cliff Walkers has gotten better reception, and that's came out
Oh, okay.
apparently this year. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
guess that's like the new Yimo to see.
There you go. Don't yeah. I would just say skip 1 second. Um all right. Well, I think this was a good one to end on. It was I think another successful Young Critics Watch Old Movies. Um that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinematary on Facebook and Twitter on Twitter and Instagram at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematary if you'd like to support the show. Thank you so much to Cam, Chad Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, for the next month, we're going to become less serious than I think we've been in the last few weeks, and we're going to be doing what we're going to be calling October, and that's
Beautiful.
OCT. OGRE. We're going to be digging into the Shrek franchise, but it's not just let's watch the Shrek movies. It's also kind of like us, it's celebrating 20 years, but it also has like this deep meme affinity, like this kind of internet culture behind it that at least for me, I kind of want to talk about the kind of pop culture-ness, the lasting effects of pop culture and internet culture related to Shrek, and why it's something that endeared for so long and has kind of like developed into these like weird things. Like at the end of the series, we're going to be talking about like the musical and this internet reinterpretation of it called Shrek Retold, that it's like that people have kind of like taken on the whole franchise. So I'm kind of looking forward to it, but that's what we will be doing for the month of October.
Was this born out of response to that Shrek hit piece that came out a few months ago?
No, it kind of came out. I watched Shrek for the first time in a lot, the first time where I watched it from like beginning to end in probably years, and I was just like, guys, Shrek slaps. Like this is a great movie.
No, it does. It's a classic. Like it's a classic.
Like I watch, but it's also just strange fucking movie. It's so goddamn.
I don't know how it got made. I don't know how they.
And then and you watch Shrek 2, which is even better. I think Shrek 2 might be my favorite.
It's been years since I've seen the second Shrek. Like, I have the first Shrek like scene for scene in memory, like just easy.
And that's what was, and so like we'll talk about that next week. Like that was what was amazing about Shrek, is that this movie. I feel like there's like everybody knows this movie. It's ingrained in your mind, and like it's just weird. It's like, why is this ingrained in my mind? So that's something we're going to be digging into over the next month. I'm kind of excited about it. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you for some Shrek next week.
Cool. Thank you for having me, Zach. Always love being here.
Yeah, here, I'll turn off the.
Okay.